The command chamber of the Xenar Dominion's flagship pulsed with cerulean light, rhythmic and sterile. Holograms danced above the long obsidian table, showing troop formations, orbital bombardment zones, and progress reports, each glowing green, each confirming dominance. Grand Strategist Corzel clicked his mandibles in amusement, one clawed hand swiping through an image of a destroyed human city. "They still use combustion-driven projectiles," he scoffed. His voice a garbled rasp filtered through the translation systems. "Metal slugs, kinetic warfare, antiquity-made flesh." General Myrick let out a nasal snort, a sign of contempt, among the Xenar. "It's almost charming, like children throwing stones at thunder." Laughter echoed around the chamber, wet insectoid clicks and hisses. "They resist not with progress, but nostalgia," Corzel said. "Let them cling to their toys. Plasma renders it all meaningless. Shields alone render such tactics obsolete." He dismissed the feed with a flick. "Focus on the final holdouts in the Northern Hemisphere. Cleanse Sector 12. Let us be done with this planet." Far below, in the frozen desolation of Sector 12, the storm howled through the jagged peaks of the Arkan Range. Snow fell like ash, burying the remnants of war beneath white silence. Sergeant Luke Marlow lay motionless, on a ridge, half covered by a canvas ghillie cloak, the barrel of his battered rifle protruding through a nest of ice and stone. He hadn't moved in hours. His breath was slow, controlled, fogging the inside of his cracked visor. A faint glow flickered on a HUD the size of a postage stamp, his only surviving piece of digital kit. No uplink, no thermal, just a battery. Gauge, barely pulsing red. They'd wiped his team out 2 weeks ago. Plasma barrage caught them during night movement. He'd pulled Corporal Tanzer out of the fire, both legs gone, screaming. Luke gave him a full magazine and walked away. No one ever said it, but it was understood. Now he was the last. Not of the battalion, not of the unit. Just the last. His fingers tightened over the receiver of his rifle, a rebuilt .338 Lapua Magnum with a suppressed barrel and analog scope. Scratched into the buttstock were 5 names, one for each man he'd served with. He shifted slightly, just enough to pull out a small comm plate, a dead man's keepsake. On it was a voice recording. It played only once, weak and static choked. Captain Rivas's voice. Faint, ragged, but clear. "They think they've won. They stopped looking. The moment they stop looking for you, that's when you shoot." Luke stared out across the valley. Below, a Xenar command post shimmered in the distance. Plasma towers, shield domes, walking behemoth mechs with energy cannons. The kind of setup that thought it couldn't be touched. He slid a single round from a wax paper pouch. Hand-loaded. Brass was scarce now. This one was special, crafted in the dark with trembling fingers, as if it knew where it belonged. The bolt, action clicked softly as he chambered it. No HUD, no AI target lock, no drone support. Just breath, distance, gravity, and time. They called it outdated. They said it was obsolete. Luke Marlow narrowed his eyes through the scope. In silence, in snow, he marked his first target and waited. The slope was icy, jagged, and cruel. But Luke Marlow moved like part of it, slow, methodical, nearly invisible. His ghillie cloak had long since frozen stiff, its patchwork of white mesh and torn snow tarp blending with the stone beneath. He'd crawled nearly a kilometer overnight, keeping below the ridgelines, skirting Xenar drone patrols by listening to their wing-beat hum long before their optics caught up. Their scanning arrays swept in tight arcs, efficient but predictable. They were programmed to detect thermal spikes, high-frequency comms, electromagnetic noise. Luke had none of that. He was the ghost they never trained their sensors for. Below him, nestled between glacier-carved cliffs, sat the Xenar Forward Operations Base, sleek and gleaming. a cold contrast against the rugged terrain. Domed shielding pulsed faintly around the central command spire, refracting the blue-white sunlight into a soft haze. Through his scope, Luke watched them, insectoid silhouettes moving with military rhythm, clicking orders to one another. Hovercraft drifted between bunkers, and automated turrets scanned for movement too fast or too hot to be human. But they'd built their perimeter for a different kind of war. Their commander, a Xenar major by the epaulets woven into his exoskeletal thorax, emerged from the central bunker and began issuing orders to a crowd of junior officers. Arrogant, Luke thought. Out in the open, no cover. Why would he need it? Shields and lasers ruled the day, right? Luke slid into position on a ledge 1.2 kilometers away. The rock gave him a natural dip, just enough clearance to sight in. He adjusted the elevation knob on his analog scope, taking long moments to breathe. The wind whispered across the ridge, teasing his hood. The HUD was dead. The satellites jammed. The smart systems long fried from EMP bursts weeks ago. It didn't matter. He licked a gloved finger, held it up for wind drift, calculated angle, distance, drop. They came to teach us how to wage war, he muttered under his breath. Now they'll learn what it means to bleed. He adjusted for the slight curvature of the earth. Not because he had to, but because he knew it was there. Gravity and patience, humanity's oldest allies. The alien commander gestured mid-sentence. His mandibles clicked in something that might have been a laugh. Luke exhaled. Slow. Squeezed the trigger. Crack. The rifle barely jolted, its recoil tamed by a custom suppressor and hand-loaded subsonic round. The sound vanished into the wind. Through the scope, Luke saw the effect. Not the moment of impact, but the instant of interruption. The Xenar major's skull jerked back, a clean hole appearing between his eye ridges. A second later, the rear of his head flowered in a mist of dark fluid, and shattered chitin. His body collapsed, legs twitching. For 3 full seconds no one moved. Then chaos bloomed, alarms blared, turrets spun, drones launched, the officers scattered, ducking into bunkers, drawing plasma carbines and scanning in all directions. But none looked up and none scanned for what didn't radiate heat. Luke was already moving. He rolled back from the ledge, slinging the rifle over his shoulder and sliding down the opposite face of the ridge, leaving only crushed snow and shallow prints behind. Below, the Xenar were shouting. He heard the heavy whump of a mech waking. Up. Drones zipped overhead, too high and too loud to track a human moving beneath trees and stone. Their shielding tech, so proud, so impenetrable, was tuned to vaporize plasma beams and disrupt directed energy, but not 300 grains of copper-jacketed lead moving at subsonic speed. In their minds, they'd already won the war. Luke smiled, just barely, as he vanished into the next ravine. Let them scramble, let them panic, let them tell stories about the first one to fall. He'd marked the next officer already. A week had passed since the first shot, and the aliens were unraveling. The Xenar command had quadrupled drone patrols. Shield frequencies rotated every 6 minutes now, an effort to adapt to a threat they didn't understand. Officers no longer walked in the open. When they spoke, it was inside reinforced bunkers, shielded on all sides, whispered through encrypted comms. Still, they died. One by one. Always a single shot. Always in silence. No muzzle flare. No heat bloom. No trace. Major. Threlzik had just stepped from a transport when a round took him through his thoracic vent. He was dead before he knew he'd been seen. Commander Irvak was struck mid-stride, across a compound shield line. His adjutants watched him fall. No sound but the thud of armor hitting soil. The only clue, the entry wounds. Tiny, precise, kinetic. The War Council gathered beneath the mountain dome. Their voices clicked with panic and indecision. It is a prototype weapon. Human special operations. It must be. No technology we know behaves like this. Nonsense. There is no energy residue, no heat decay. It is primitive, but it kills with impossible accuracy. Perhaps there is no weapon. Perhaps this is some ghost protocol, a drone or camouflaged AI. Perhaps we are being hunted. Captain Ralton, grizzled and more pragmatic than most, rubbed his claws together in silence before speaking. They are not fighting our war. We are playing by their rules now. Above the fray, buried beneath a snowbank and half-frozen rock, Luke Marlow watched through his scope. His skin was cracked from cold. One of his fingertips had turned a deep purple, and the flesh beneath his nails was raw. He hadn't eaten more than half a ration bar in 2 days, but his aim was steady. Each kill took hours of crawling. Each escape was a battle of terrain, timing, and physics. He was long past fear, past pain. He had become function. One shot, one lesson. Today, he had baited them. A burned-out human APC, shell of a once proud armored transport, sat in a ravine, below. He'd set a decoy rifle on the top hatch, shaped from spare parts and scrap, with a heat-emitting coil beneath it that mimicked a human chest signature. The aliens had grown bold again, convinced they were flushing him out. A hover skiff dropped a small recon team at the site. 6 Xenar soldiers, scanning the fake weapon with multi-spectrum sensors. Luke didn't watch them. He watched the squad leader, taller, wearing an armored crest, issuing orders with curt claw gestures. He stood nearest a rusted metal wall from a collapsed comms tower, the perfect surface. Luke had calculated the angle 2 nights ago. He lined up not on the alien, but off to the right, on a jagged plate of bent alloy. Wind, negligible. Distance, 2,030 meters. Temperature, bone-cutting cold. He inhaled. Exhaled. Crack. The round struck the edge of the metal, deflected perfectly, bounced like a billiard shot. It veered mid-air, clipped a chunk of ice, and continued on course, low and fast. The squad leader jerked as the round punched through his side and tore through his midsection at an oblique angle, detonating inside his armor. By the time the others processed what had happened, Luke was already sliding back down the ridge. No fire, no sound, no movement. The Xenar scrambled. Drones descended. The APC was torn apart by plasma bursts. The decoy rifle melted into slag. Nothing found. Again. They reassembled what little data they had and fed it to the AI. A combat learning system evolved through hundreds of wars. Its analysis returned nonsense, random vectors, impossible rebounds. Trajectory inconsistent with known tactics, it said. Threat source anomalous, recalculating. They had built a machine brain to predict plasma fire and magnetic warfare, but it could not outthink gravity, or anticipate a man who sighted through ice and metal and memory. Luke huddled beneath a hollowed boulder, wrapped in his cloak, shaking from cold, but smiling. They were afraid now, and fear bled more than flesh. Snow drifted over Luke like a burial shroud. He barely felt the wind anymore, numbed from days without fire or shelter. His lips were cracked, fingers blackened with frostbite. His heartbeat thudded irregularly, like a dying drum. The cold was winning, but not yet. Not until he finished what he came for. Above the basin, nestled in an obsidian platform of alien alloy, stood the Xenar Supreme Command Spire. A grotesque fusion of organic and machine. It pulsed with blue veins of living circuitry, its spires humming with power. Atop it, surrounded by honor guards and shield barriers, a holographic podium shimmered to life. To all forces, the broadcast began in translated tones, beamed across Earth and the orbital fleet. The resistance has collapsed. Human holdouts are scattered and dying. Their weapons are inferior. Their tactics, obsolete. This war is over, the speaker, Supreme Commander Zalvar inched forward. He stood over 3 meters tall, draped in ceremonial armor and neural banners that fluttered in synthetic wind. Cameras hovered around him, broadcasting in all directions. This was meant to be a coronation. Luke was already prone, half buried in a frozen crevice 2.6 kilometers away. He hadn't moved in 4 hours, hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. A single round lay chambered in the rifle, his last. He adjusted the dial on his scope manually with hands that barely obeyed. Every nerve screamed. His vision blurred, narrowed, refocused. The wind shifted slightly. He corrected. 1 shot, 1 chance. His breathing slowed. Inhale, exhale, hold. On the platform, Zalvar raised his clawed hand in final declaration. Let this be the last war fought on this primitive world. Crack. The sound traveled slower than the bullet. Through the scope, Luke watched the moment of impact. Zalvar's head jolted back, crown fracturing, a blossom of black-red mist erupting. In zero gravity, his lifeless form crumpled before his speech ended. The broadcast cut to static. Across the alien fleet, silence fell. Then chaos. Emergency channels buzzed. Ground troops scrambled. Shield engineers screamed across channels about unaccounted vectors. Orbital commanders screamed louder. Within the hour, the order came down. Full retreat from Earth. Reason: undetectable ballistic threat. Enemy unpredictable. Shield architecture vulnerable. The myth of energy dominance was shattered. Their algorithms had no answer for wind, timing, and one stubborn man with a bolt-action rifle. Luke never moved again. The rifle slipped from his fingers as he stared upward, watching faint auroras ripple in the stratosphere. His eyes reflected stars. He had no AI, no orbital support, no drones, just patience, grit, and one truth spoken louder than words: a bullet. Epilogue. In the years that followed, alien academies studied the Battle of Echo Ridge with awe and caution. The Xenar refused to speak the sniper's name, calling him only the Phantom of Gravity. Human recruits wore patches of a lone rifle stamped against a blood-red planet. And across the galaxy, in hushed war councils and whispered simulations, one lesson became doctrine. Ballistics never lie.